You don't actually know what neutral is. You think you know what footsies is as well, but you don't actually know what that is either. So let me explain. You've probably told or been told yourself you need to work on your neutral, and you try and go into a game and play a neutral focus game and realize you just can't. You try and focus on the neutral game, maybe outspace your opponent or look for a whiff punish, only to get hit by a jump in or DI or drive rush, and suddenly you're not playing neutral anymore. It's easy to get mad and complain, why won't my opponent play footsies with me? But this misses a fundamental aspect of playing neutral. Everyone says that neutral is just playing footsies, and while that's correct, it fails to explain how to actually put yourself and your opponent in a situation to play neutral. The aim of this video is to give you a better fundamental understanding of neutral and footsies. It will explain what we mean when we say playing neutral, and you will learn some strong basic tools that you can use to begin improving your own footsies game. To begin, let's start with an actual definition of what neutral is. Neutral is the ground-based footsies game created in the mid-screen game state where both players respect each other or are forced to. This is a loaded sentence, so let's break it down. The easiest concept to grasp is the mid-screen game state. This simply refers to the mid-screen neutral where no player is operating in their effective range. For example here, Zangief's not in his effective range. He would love to be up close and personal so he can threaten with SPD or other grabs, but he's just a little far to be effective. And Guile here would prefer to be further away so he can begin on his game plan threatening with booms, but he's just a little too close to be effective. This state is how round starts and is referred to as neutral. When we say neutral here, we refer to both the game state and the game we play in this state, footsies. When we say footsies, we're referring to the game within the game, the fine-tuning of spacing between opponents, chipping away with normals while also trying to stay out of your opponent's effective range and covering your opponent's approach. Footsies can be simplified into a 3-stage cycle, as excellently described in this video, which you should watch after this one. Let's start with the basics. You and your opponent are both mid-screen. Your opponent is hunkered down out of attack range. What do? You walk up to them and you hit them. This creates pressure and often rewards you, such as in SF6, this will damage the opponent's drive gauge, giving you an advantage. Now let's say your opponent is the one walking up to you and berating you with attacks. What do? Cover their approach with attacks of your own. This stops the opponent from waltzing into your space and forces them to maintain some distance, preventing them from berating you with attacks. So now your opponent, who's watched this video but not up to this part, starts spamming relentless attacks to cover your approach. What do? You wait for them to miss and then you whiff punish. Dancing around their poke range, walking in and out, baits the opponent to try cover your approach, only for them to miss and for you to punish. And finally, after having gone through all of these stages, your opponent is obnoxiously dancing in front of you, waiting for you to whiff a cover attack so he can punish you. What do? You walk up to them and you hit them. This takes us back to the first stage, berating them with attacks, dealing some drive gauge damage, and so the cycle is complete. This trifecta of game states is a simplified approach to how neutral operates. Now everything I've talked about thus far is simply a drop in the bucket of how much actually encompasses the neutral game, let alone structuring your offense and defense and applying this knowledge. As a player, you will need to understand these 3 levels of footsies, as well as be able to recognize which one your opponent is in and which one you should be in. In a future video, I'll cover how to structure your offense effectively and how to keep your opponent guessing incorrectly. However, for now, I will simply go over a few strong tools you can use in your footsies game that revolve around these 3 stages. Spacing traps. A spacing trap is a move or sequence of moves, usually negative, that spaces you and your opponent to where any normal pressed by your opponent after you both recover can be caught or punished with a button of your own. These are strong when your opponent is in the hunkering down stage of neutral. Spacing traps are excellent against opponents who don't like to block and are insistent on mashing after your pressure. Any character can utilize these, however if your opponent reads you're trying to spacing trap them, they can use a slower, further reaching button to take their turn back. Here, my opponent is hunkering down, allowing me to come up close and hit them on block to create a spacing trap. Wish punishes. A wish punish is a move thrown out as a wild attempt to punish your opponent, usually high risk, high reward, strong when your opponent is in the covering stage of neutral. The aim of a wish punish is to bait the opponent to attack before swinging with a huge button of your own. A wish punish is different to a whiff punish in that you're not reacting, you're simply pressing your button in hopes it will connect, hence the high risk. However, in being able to use a slower button, which is much harder to react to a whiffed move with, it grants you a higher reward. Here, my opponent is trying to cover my approach, so I can walk in and out of their space before swinging with the big button, hoping it hits. Whiff whiff punishes. A whiff whiff punish is baiting your opponent to try and whiff punish you before punishing their failed attempt at punishing you. These are strong when your opponent is in the whiff punishing stage of neutral. If you notice your opponent is very keen to whiff punish you, a strong tactic can be to use a light attack to bait your opponent's quick reactions and make them whiff, leaving you open to punish them in return. These are usually low risk and can be an excellent way to punish your opponent for being too trigger happy with their whiff punishes. Here, I know my opponent's looking for my crouch medium kick, so instead I use my crouch light kick to bait them to try and whiff punish, and when they do, I'm ready with a punish of my own. Utilizing these tools, as well as always keeping the 3 stages of footsies in the back of your mind, is what wins games. You should use these tools sparingly, lest they become predictable, as well as remembering to alternate your options to always keep your opponent guessing. I will revisit these in a future video about structuring your offense, however you should begin incorporating these tools into your kit to improve your footsies as a whole. To summarize, neutral, the position, is when both players are mid-screen and not necessarily in the desired screen range. Neutral, the game within this position, is what we call footsies, and is the alternating of the 3 stages, covering, punishing, hunkering, as well as the tools we use within these stages that can win us games. You should now be able to lab this knowledge, experiment with your character's normals, and use these all to better your footsies game. So now we've had a bit of a deep dive into footsies, and while I could go even further into depth, what about the rest of our definition? Putting it back on screen here, what do we mean when we say both players respect each other? The respect we talk about here can either be already established or forced. Respect being established is a concept likely beyond anyone watching this video, myself included. If you watch any high level matches, both opponents come into the match already respecting their opponent. They play a very grounded, quote unquote, traditional footsies game when appropriate, lining up to our definition earlier. The respect has already been earned from their previous results or tournament winnings maybe, hence both players almost immediately conform to a very footsie-centric game. But what is this respect? What are we respecting exactly? You are respecting that your opponent knows and understands how to deal with bullshit. Think spin knuckle, drive rush, dragon lash, drive impact, rapid jump ins, teleports, and etc. In a vacuum, all of these options have counters that range from easy to execute to a bit tedious at most, but there are options against them all. If you're watching this video, you can probably hop into training mode right now and learn to react and beat out all of these options. But what do all of these options have in common? I called them bullshit earlier, but they're more appropriately named neutral skips. A neutral skip is a move or tool designed to bypass the footsies gameplay and skip straight into the guessing for game situations fighting games are known for. When I said earlier respect means you trust your opponent can stop bullshit, this is the bullshit I was talking about. Playing neutral is difficult and scary, so neutral skips exist and are by design used to bypass footsies, to completely ignore it and not play it. So, in a match, if your opponent can't react to drive impact or can't anti-air, you bet your ass you're going to keep using these tools. When these tools, which are easier to execute than an intricate whiff punishing game, work and can win you the round, there's no reason to play footsies. Footsies cannot exist in a game where neutral skipping tools are used relentlessly. Making your opponent respect you and forcing them to stop using neutral skips is the only way to revert to playing footsies, and this can either be established from the get-go, such as top level play, or established by force. Establishing this respect by force is easy. If your opponent can't jump because they know you'll anti-air them, they can't drive impact because they know you'll react, and they can't teleport because they know you'll deal with it, and so on and so forth, they are left with no option. The respect has been established by force. You prove to them they must respect you, and so they are forced to play neutral. We now understand the definition of footsies a little better. Let's see the definition again. Neutral is the ground-based footsies game created in the mid-screen game state where both players respect each other or are forced to. Where footsies is the moment-to-moment spacing, punishing, covering that create the footsies trifecta. Respect is the knowledge that you or your opponent can and will punish any attempts to bypass footsies, and we can force this respect by proving to your opponent that neutral skips won't work on you. This fundamental shift in how you understand neutral now should hopefully help you piece together how you can improve your own neutral, as well as understand why in some games your opponent just refuses to play neutral with you, and how to make them. But don't get it twisted, neutral skips do work, that's why they exist after all. However, being able to utilize them effectively requires an understanding of the mental stack, which is another video in and of itself. Thanks for watching, feel free to add me on CFN and follow me on Twitter. Peace.
Not looking good, 4 NL.
One shimmy away. One
Let's go!
Are you kidding me?
Are you kidding me?
Come to God! Actually highlight that, yo!
Please, digital scissors for the love. Wow.
The look on his face as soon as he was prepping for that situation. Bro, you can, listen, you have to rewind it. You have to see the look.